The number of sick days taken by each employee in a company during a year was recorded. The data was organized in a box and whisker diagram as shown below. So here's the number of sick days, and this is the number of sick days taken by each employee during the year. So there's one employee that it looks like took potentially, 16, 17, 18 sick days. And there's an employee who had taken only 2 sick days, and so on and so on. Part A, for this data, write down the minimum number of sick days taken during the year. Okay, so the minimum number of sick days taken by any employee in the year would be 2 sick days. And that's just reading this off of our chart. So this is 2. Minimum number of sick days would be 2 days. Lower quartile, remember our box and whisker plot is divided up into the min, the max, this is our median, and this is Q1 or quartile 1, and this is Q2. So if we want to talk about the lower quartile, that would be Q1, and it looks like it occurs at 6. So the lower quartile is 6. Oops. And the median is itself, looks like it is 8. All right. Once again, earlier exams were a little more straightforward in their application. Later on, there's more, conceptual demands. It would ask more than just identifying features. They would ask, it becomes more like part 2, to be honest. There's a greater proportion of part 2 as compared to part 1. So more kind of interpretation, I suppose. So let's go on to part 2. Paul claims that this box and whisker diagram can be used to infer that the percentage of employees who took fewer than 6 sick days is smaller than the percentage of employees who took more than 11 sick days. State whether Paul is correct and then justify your answer. So 2 marks. So here we go. Paul is saying that those that took fewer than 6 sick days is smaller than the percentage of employees who took more than 11. This is a common kind of misunderstanding or misinterpretation, I suppose, of a box and whisker diagram. Because if we look at this, these are the number of people, for example, who took fewer than 6 sick days. And the number of people who took more than 11 sick days are gathered within here. But remember a box and whisker plot. A box and whisker plot gathers, or we can say breaks up our data into quartiles. So there's 25% here, 25% here, 25% here, and 25% here. In each of these quartiles, there's 25% of our population. So can we say that those who took fewer sick days, those who took fewer than 6 sick days is smaller than the percentage of employees who took more than 11? No, 25% of our employees took fewer than 6, and 25% took more than 11. The distribution is wider, that is to say there's a greater range within this set, but in each case, it's 25% of the employees. 25% took fewer than 6, 25% took more than 11. And that would be our response to whether Paul is correct in this case. So, no. Both represent 25% of our sample. And then we would say Paul is not correct. So this is one of those R1A1 questions. You can't just state the answer and get, let's say an answer mark. That is to say, you can't have R0, R1. Maybe I shouldn't have stated this, but you can't have just Paul is not correct, Paul is correct, and just guess and say there's a 50-50 chance. You need to have reasoning in order to get the final answer. And so just be careful with that.